Welcome back. With me now, Ben Oquist and David Gazzard. Let's start with the China row. Did the PM need to dive in? Obviously it was an outrageous tweet. It was disgraceful. No one's going to, think it was anything other than entirely inappropriate. But was it for the PM to dive in with the outrage and respond? Let someone else do it.
Well, I think it's been pretty much across the board. So that probably says, yeah, you need national leadership on a thing like that. I think the government's been keen to calibrate the message. We were outraged by what was essentially a crude piece of propaganda. But the relationship itself has to be minded, and, I don't think anyone wants to take it further, but we do have to stick up for ourselves. I think, the PM is of a view that Australia's sovereignty comes first and foremost, so there was a need to send a message back.
There's also economic. I mean, we talk about the national interest. That extends to the economic national interest too, yeah. And of course China's a big chunk of that, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I suppose you would say we're not going to put on tariffs on Chinese imports for Christmas. That's not really the Australian style. We work in a multilateral way. It would be great to have a discussion with counterparts in China, but they're not engaging. But Australia obviously is dependent in a significant way on China.
What did you make of the response? Was it appropriate from the Prime Minister? Certainly Labor saying that expressing unity on the broader criticism as opposed to maybe the style. Penny Wong saying there needs to be a strategic and calm handling of it. Was there a bit of difference between the two?
I think China's done a lot wrong. There's a lot at fault, but Australia needs to look at how it does diplomacy better as well. It was right to take offence at a tweet that was meant to cause offence, but perhaps the Prime Minister overacted by demanding an apology from China. Don't ever demand something that you can't get. Maybe a better approach would have been for the Prime Minister to say this is not the actions of a country that's got a proud tradition and wants to be a big force in international relations. It does China a disservice. I'm going to call in the head of Foreign Affairs, Frances Adamson, and get her to go and call in the ambassador and tell them that this is not the way that China behaves, it won't be good for them. I think that might have been a smarter diplomatic play.
Yeah, well, you're right. They were in the wrong. There's no doubt about that. They've been in the wrong a lot of this, but by the same token, we can show more nuance, can't we? I mean,
we can, but I disagree with if you're never going to hold them to a standard, then we wouldn't be pushing for a global inquiry into the roots of the pandemic, which is where all this started. There are some expectations on China to uphold a certain standard, whether it be Tiananmen Square or the Uyghurs or just, what essentially has been called out for a piece of propaganda. And there's nothing wrong with that to sort of say, and I think if you look at where Morrison's gone, he's galvanised world support for what he's doing. There is now a global campaign to support Australian wine on the back of that because he has called the Chinese out. Now, holding them to a standard and being deliberately provocative are two different things, and I think there's nuance in that space, but I don't see any attempts by the Australians to go further than what they've done.
Let's look at the GDP. Very encouraging number today, Ben Oquist. I guess it's all underpinned by the health story, which almost, you look at those numbers, 61 nationwide, the vast majority in hotel quarantine, it's almost eliminated.
Well,
in the community.
As the Treasurer has previously said, the best economic response is an effective health response. But the best economic response has been a government-led support for the economy as well. I mean, the government itself boasts of the $270+ billion it's put into the economy, and that's held it up. I saw the Treasurer in your interview talking about a business-led recovery. The reality is it hasn't been a business-led recovery. Private sector investment down 0.2%, household consumption or household spending up 7.9%. It's that household support, that household activity that keeps the economy going. And we have the one poor sector has been a 1.7% drop in mining sector. And I saw Keith Pitt in Question Time going on about how the mining sector and the resources sector has saved us. It's clearly he didn't read the national accounts. He didn't quote the national accounts. And I think the problem for the government and Pitt in particular, and the Prime Minister's previous rhetoric, has been this idea of a gas-led recovery. We're not going to have a gas-led recovery. Gas and oil, 0.4% of the workforce. You get 14 jobs for every million you spend in education. Gas is at the bottom of the list at 0.4%. Arts, you get 8 jobs for every million spent. The gas-led economy, a gas-led recovery, has been proved a failure in these national accounts. I didn't know what Keith Pitt was talking about in question time.
Let's look at your view now, David, on the GDP numbers, because I've got to say that, not just the active cases, but the broader mood with the borders reopening and so on, that's just gold for confidence, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing confidence returning. I think, everyone's expecting to see growth rebounding strongly now. I think the government's what they've going on, and we've been talking about this for 6 months now. The original attempt was to provide a bridge to business, and I think that has stimulated demand. There's no doubt about that. That's borne up out in these figures. But to get to the point where business is employing and growing and productive, and to Ben's point, mining has been the backbone of the economy. It's down 1%, but it's on historical high levels. Without mining in the economy, we'd be a lot worse. The government has provided a temporary bridge. It was scalable. It can come back as the economy rebounds, and we're certainly seeing strong signs of the economy rebounding.
David Gazzard, Ben Oquist, gentlemen, thanks as always.
Thank you.
See you next week. Thanks for your company.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
Wages are growing at their slower, sustained pace.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.